At this time, you know why we're all here. We have a proposed shelter going up in our community. It's a 200-bed single males, and it's going in the Westchester Square area. Just a few things. The Bronx, the median income in the Bronx is $38,000. Queens, $69,000. Manhattan, $66,000. Brooklyn, $56,000. Staten Island, the median income is $79,000. 84% of the students in the Bronx attend public schools. We are the lowest as far as median income goes. We are the least healthy borough in the state. The least healthy, the least educated, and financially we're the poorest borough of the 5 boroughs of New York. Just a little more information. The Bronx is the second smallest. Manhattan is the smallest borough. The Bronx is the second smallest. And yet, we have more group homes and shelters than any other borough. Staten Island has 1. Brooklyn, twice the size of the Bronx, or more than 2 times the population, and they have less shelters than we have. It's time to stop dumping on the Bronx. Because the property value in the Bronx is less expensive than any of the other boroughs, developers come here, they buy property, they get all these tax incentives from the state or the city, and they put up these shelters. And our middle class is fleeing New York. And if you look at the proposed areas where these shelters are, and I hate to use this because I'm not one to throw racial numbers out. I hate when people start saying race, race, race. But if you look at the numbers, and if you look at where the shelters are, it jumps out at you off the page. Any place where there's a minority community, you have more shelters than you do in other boroughs or in other areas. And that's a disgrace. I would have never said, somebody said that to me, I said, that's not true. But I looked at the numbers and I looked at the paper and I said, this is disgraceful. So one of the things I think we need to do as a community, and again, this affects 10, it affects 11, it affects every community in the Bronx. We have to be verbal. You have to let our elected officials know enough is enough. Now this place should be full of all our elected officials should be here because it's important for us. They represent us, therefore they should be here representing us. And it's a disgrace when they don't show up and they don't stand up and scream the way we are coming together to scream for our communities. What affects one of us affects us all. If it affects District 10, Community Board 10, it's going to affect 11. If it affects 11, it'll affect 12. To turn around and say, don't put it in my backyard, put it in your backyard, that's ridiculous. Because then we're hurting each other. We need to come together as a Bronx community and say enough. And if you write your politicians, talk to your elected officials, and tell them, stand up. We don't want to hear you anymore. Carl Hasty is from the Bronx. He's a Bronx guy, nice guy. He should be screaming for us, as should all our elected officials. And I get a little tired when people promise us everything, then after the election, nothing seems to get done. We don't want any more dumping in the Bronx. We have enough that's going on here. And I'm glad you came out this evening. Our next speaker is Jeremy Warnicki. He will give you all statistics and all that good stuff. But one of the important things that I want to let you know is that maybe it's time to start going to the houses of the people who sell their property that don't live here anymore, sell their property to a homeless shelter or the city, not caring what becomes of the neighborhood once they're gone. Maybe it's time to go to their homes and pick it outside their homes and let them know they're not too happy with it. So, again, we need to stand together as a Bronx community to fight this nonsense. This is a nice area. We're a melting pot. We come together and we work together, shoulder to shoulder, and we care for each other, we care for our homes, we care for our neighborhoods. We want our children to have the same upbringing and values as everybody else. They wouldn't do this in Scarsdale. They did it in Manhattan. They did it in the very richest section of Manhattan. But they were very picky on where they put it. But again, Staten Island has one. Why? And then I've done visits to group homes. Most of the people in those group homes come from Brooklyn. I went to visit with Jeremy, we went to two group homes, and every one of the residents in those group homes came from Brooklyn. Why are we housing the people from Brooklyn? We owe it to our neighbors. We owe it to the people in our community to take care of them. If we have homeless in our community, we'll take care of our own homeless. If we have children with disabilities, it's our job to take care of our children. But then it's Brooklyn's job, or Manhattan's job, or Staten Island's job to take care of their children. Why are we taking care of everybody else's children? I thank you for listening. I like to back everyone wants to go out, but we need to work together and stay together for the betterment of our borough. Thank you.
Good evening. So before I speak and state the facts, I just want to recognize, make sure everybody knows who is here. So next to Al, we have obviously Councilmember Joe Nye, and then we have an attorney, John Parker, who specializes in environmental land use law. And then we have the chairman of Committee Board 10, John Russo. We also have plenty of other members of Committee Board 10 and 11 here. We have representatives from Assemblymember Benedetto's office here, the Westchester Square Bid, Senator Biaggi's office, Councilmember Torres' office, Councilmember King's office.
Where are they?
They're in the crowd here. I don't know where the assembly member is. His staffer will be speaking. Okay?
Well, they could go
The staffer will be speaking. Just give him some due time, please. So if I missed anybody, we have Katrina Santi from the mayor's office here as well. So did everybody get a copy of this handout I prepared for everybody?
No.
So there are more copies up front. I have a few here, but I'm just going to get into it. If you don't have a copy, try to get one or just listen to me. So the City Department of Homeless Services and the proposed shelter provider Care for the Homeless will not be in attendance tonight. Although Homeless Services was invited, and they are planning to come to a committee meeting in March at our office at the CB11 office on Colden Avenue. The city, at the end of January 29th to be exact, they emailed me information regarding their proposal. They did later mail a letter, which was not as important as the email they sent. So I'm reading off of page 1 off the handout. So again, this is a proposed shelter for 1364 to 1400 Blondell Avenue. The provider is called Care for the Homeless. They operate one other homeless services unit in the Bronx and then one in Manhattan. They primarily specialize in services for people, not necessarily homeless. The shelter on Jerome Avenue, this is not on the sheet, but I'm going to tell you since I have it in my mind. The shelter on Jerome Avenue that they have here in the Bronx for mentally disturbed women, I believe the one in Manhattan is similar. The proposed shelter for Westchester Square is 200 single adult men. And the proposed opening date is late 2021. The city already told me that more likely that is not happening because they never start on time anyway, so prepare for 2022. This is going to be, I'll just continue reading through page 1 before I just go off script. So there are 300, according to the city statistics, there are 394 households comprised of 841 individuals from Community District 11 in the shelter system across the city. But as some of you may have heard, we don't have any shelter systems in CB 11. So one thing I've asked off the script is the city to provide more statistics, to be a little more transparent. Our committee board plans on voting on an item like this. For example, there are about 1% of the homeless population, which maybe is as much as 1,000 people, currently come from outside of the city, whether it's Westchester County, Long Island, New Jersey, Georgia. So we are asking Community Board 11, we'll be voting hopefully in favor of asking the city to provide those statistics on where exactly people are coming from outside the city, originating from. So continue with the script, the background on the not-for-profit. So they are currently managing transitional housing. Going on page 2. They provide on-site services. So this shelter will provide on-site services. That's what, again, they specialize in. The shelter facility on Jerome Avenue, which I visited, half of the health services, half of the patients are from the shelter, half are from outside the shelter. And they said something similar would happen here at Blondell Avenue. If you have any questions that we're not able to answer tonight because we don't have the provider here, please send them to me, send them to us, call us, ideally email us, so it's in writing, I can easily forward it on to the provider, who I did speak to earlier today. Our contact information is on the top of the letterhead here, but I can give you business cards after the meeting for anybody that wants some. So, off-site service, they're going to do linkage. They're going to try to do employment hiring, objectives, GED instruction. So, the location will serve individuals with mental health challenges, but it's not designed specifically for mental health people. Again, the shelter on Jerome Avenue is for mentally disturbed women. It's very specific. This is basically any adult man. Security, so obviously they're concerned about security, or at least they know people will be concerned. They plan on having 40 security cameras installed. This is going to be top to bottom construction. We will take questions at the end. We will ask people to come up to the mic. So when we say that's open, you'll come to this mic or that mic. Security, Westchester Square, so this is officially Board 10, or Board 11, I'm sorry, but it's right across the street from Board 10, which I say on page 3. In fact, let's move to there where I show pictures. You'll see there's really nothing there currently. There are some, on the bottom of page 3, you will see there are some structures there. They're going to do a top to bottom construction. It's going to be, generally they take existing buildings and rehab them. That's not going to be the case here, because if you can see from these photos, there's really nothing there. And to house 200 people, they're going to need a lot more than what is there currently. So the last page, I think worth noting, is the city map. So it's 2 properties we're looking at, 1364 and 1400. That whole area. South of that is, and east of that is the MTA. So you can see who the owner is, Reading, Missouri. You can see the year. So there's 2 descriptions here. This is for 1400, this is for 1364. You can see when the building, what's existing there was built, according to the city. And you can see what kind of zoning district it is, M1-1. So this is an as-of-right property. So basically, I don't know if you've heard, but the city just comes in when they want and do these shelters anyway. Even if you provide alternate sites and whatnot, I've been told that they still build them anyway. So it's going to be interesting. So I'm going to turn this over to the council member because I know he needs to say a few things. Oh yes, I'm sorry. I was going to do the chairman of Community Board 10, Mr. Joe Russo.
Good morning. There you go. Thanks for the name correction, Joe. So listen, just a couple of things. Obviously from Community Board 10, we have a vested interest in what happens in 11 and vice versa. We're neighbors, and Mark always says our front door is 11's back door and so on. So just to put numbers in perspective, in Community Board 10, we have 73 combinations of group homes, programs, and homeless shelters. So, again, it's not a question of, and if you add all the services up at 11, I'm sure it's a comparable number as well. And from a saturation standpoint, 21 of those 73, so close to a third of those are in the Westchester, Zariga area. And within there, we have things like a daytop village, we have a Sunshine Daycare, we have the Soundview Throgs Neck Mental Health Center. Now, why a Soundview Throgs Neck Mental Health Center in Westchester Square, I don't know, but they'll figure that out. Doris Street Group Home, and then a public school, PS 12 Lewis and Clark School. None of those things, and none of the other, from an individual standpoint, none of the other 21 programs are necessarily bad or not wanted or not helpful. But when you look at the accumulation and you look at the issue of saturation in the Westchester Square Zariga community, it's a ridiculous amount. And again, this is not in Ward 10, this is in Ward 11, but it's in the Westchester Square Zariga community if you add this group home in there. So we stand committed to stopping this. We stand committed to working with Ward 11 and working with the council member and all the other elected officials to get this thing stopped. The city will tell you that they have a homeless emergency, which means that kind of all bets are off. And that's fine if you have an existing building, but we're talking about literally I don't know, I think the numbers is a $7 million investment to buy the property. And again, I apologize for coming in late if something's already covered, but a $7 million investment to buy the property, plus at least from my math, a $3 to $5 million investment to construct this. And you're not going to be able to service anyone for at least 2 to 3 years till then. So if there's truly a homeless emergency, if it's truly a major issue that the city's facing, this is not the location or the program that should be undertaken in our community. So that's all I got. Again, I apologize for being late, and I want to move on with the program, and definitely want to hear what you guys have to say. So I'll turn it over to Mark and go from there, and then take questions obviously at the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Councilmember Mark Joe, I wish we were here under different circumstances. But I want everyone to know that this is the early stages. This is the preliminary stages. This is as proactive as you can possibly get to get ahead of this thing rather than behind it. Aside from what the Jeremy mentioned and Al and Joe, the facts are M1 zoning allowed this shelter to be built as of right. Keep this in mind. That means there's no need for community board approval. There's no need for council member rezoning. There's no need for anyone's input. This is as of right. We understand this. Let's understand something else. Community Board 11 did not choose this site. And why do I mention this? We are very passionate people. We take pride in the communities that we live in and the neighborhoods that we call home. But sometimes we let our passion get ahead of us. For example, when we start spreading rumors, when others are being attacked, it's not very helpful. And I will share with you one of those attacks. As an elected official, I'm expected to be attacked. You need thick skin. But there are men, the men at this table this evening are volunteers, with the exception of this attorney, who's here of his own free will. On February 13th, I called for a meeting with Community Board 10 and 11 to strategize, one, for a town hall meeting so we can inform the public of what we know, and two, strategize a plan how we can get ahead of this. The emotions and the threats that were made to community board members is uncalled for. Threatening to go to someone's home with 100 protesters and to break his windows and do what other harm to his property and his family is not who Community Board 10 and 11 residents are. and it should not be tolerated. Al D'Angelo, the chair of Community Board 11, did not select Blondell Avenue, nor did anyone else. It was a developer that made a deal with a private owner. No city funding was involved, no city property was involved, no approval from any community board member or elected official. Do we understand this? Because when people leave, they somehow may not understand the real facts, and because of rumors that are placed out there. I want to make sure that when you leave this evening, you know the truth and the facts, however limited they are. But I would imagine you agree that we should not be threatening anyone, let alone volunteers who give up their free time and community members that care like yourself to be here this evening. And we should push back against such hatred. You agree?
Yeah, agree.
Thank you.
Name the person.
I wish we could. Because the person that texted Al D'Angelo used a Google number where the 49 is investigating because they said a lot more in there than they should have. Threatening someone, by the way, is a crime. And they're looking into it. I don't know how far they've gotten. And I know that this was a little bit personal for Al, and I got his permission to bring this up because I don't know who else is being threatened. I know I get my fan club, but I'm expected to have a fan club. So I wish I could answer you, and we'll get to the bottom of that when Al finds out, and we'll make sure that we use whatever the law permits in prosecuting anyone that threatens or wishes physical harm, not zero tolerance. So we'll continue on the facts only. Community Board 10 and 11 are neighbors, and they're not taking advantage of one another. The option, and I heard that Community Board 11 could choose an alternative site. It's not a real option. Where are you going to put it? In another neighborhood? And now, if that's the course, Community Board 11 would be determining what community gets a shelter. Instead of fighting against shelters, now we're gonna pick and choose what neighborhood or what neighbors' lives we're going to destroy. And I hope I'm not using too hard of a language, but I'm saying what most of you are thinking. Shelters are needed. I would rather see money go into permanent housing rather than a shelter system. We're housing 200 men together. I can't see benefiting those 200 men. I can't see it benefiting the community. We have a responsibility to house those that are homeless. But let's do it right from the beginning. You can build homes, permanent homes, affordable housing, rather than warehouse them in a single facility. That's my personal view. But tonight we're here to hear from you, to make sure that we take our marching orders from you. And when I mentioned not too long ago that M1, and I found out only about a year ago when I was dealing with Blondell Commons, that M1 zoning allows for a shelter as of right. And I negotiated a affordable housing to avoid a shelter from coming in. There were people in this crowd that used that as an excuse to say I was using a scare tactic. Well, folks, what I prevented a year ago is happening today at a different site. And what we do next will determine on your input. Collectively, between the two community boards and the elected officials, we're going to push back. It won't be easy, and for those of you that are aware, Billionaires Row tried to do it, and they had some of the best attorneys in New York City. But we are at the very beginning. The contract has been signed, but it hasn't been closed. So what does that mean? There is a contract of an agreement between the private owner of the property and a developer. I've been on the phone with the property owner to stress our concerns and disapproval. To his defense, he did not know it was going to be a shelter. The contract is worded in a way where it says for a legal use without describing what it would be. It was afterwards that he found out, and he was just as surprised as all of us are here this evening. I will continue to work with that property owner to hopefully convince him that a shelter there is not needed, not warranted, and not the best use as we explore what other options are available. I will do your bidding, but I am not going to take this one on my own. Everyone needs to stand up and take a position. Community leaders, community board members, and elected officials. Because I'm the city council member, this falls solely in my realm. But it's our responsibility. So whether it be a state elected, a federal elected, whether it community board 10 or 11, whether it be 2 community boards, community board members, or residents, stakeholders, community leaders, you have to be engaged. The last time I did this, I know what I did. I did the right thing, and I was attacked for it. I learned. Now I'm going to get my marching orders from the people at this table and all of you. That's what this meeting was all about. February 13th, the rumor started immediately that we are doing a closed-door meeting to make arrangements with the developers. This is a moment of fact. When the provider reached out to meet with us, said, no way until I meet with the community board. No way until we meet with the residents. So when we sit down, both community board 11, 10, and myself, we will know what to ask and what position to take. This is as proactive as you could possibly get. There is no deal, there's been no meeting, there's no contract at play, and we're gonna do our best to prevent that contract from closing. Are we okay so far?
Yeah.
Some of the options that you're gonna hear from Mr. Parker as what lawful options we have should the closing take place. And that puts us in a very difficult position once the closing takes place. We're gonna try to use what you say tonight and the influence that we have and the advice of this man or any other attorney that wants to do this pro bono to step up tonight and play a role as we determine on how we can stop this from moving forward. The Metro North is coming in. There is a rezoning of the entire area that should be considered before this site is approved for anything. I don't know what the city planning projected Blondell Avenue to be. For all I know, there could be utilities coming in. There could be an infrastructure that's needed for the Metro North. There could be parking that was decided would be the best fit for that area. So allowing this shelter to be built there undermines the city planning's efforts. And if you recall, people in this room attended meetings and they shared their concerns as we try to shape what the area should look like in the future with the Metro North coming in. This could undermine the work that was done, the input that was received by the community, and the city's projections of the needs of this area. Environmental issues, the property is environmentally contaminated. It's in a flood zone. There is an easement of a DMAP street that has not been fully demapped. There's geotechnical questions, the depth of the bedrock, does it need piles, the bad soil, and apparently in that area there's old steel beams that run across an old rail tracks. There's a possible river flow underneath. The MTA and the Transit Authority need to approve it because this abuts the rail yards. There could be a setback requirement. There may be need for underpinning for future construction. There could be a independent monitor that could be appointed. There's a fair share report that's needed. There's a feasibility study that's needed, environmental impact study. Take into consideration today and when the Metro North comes in. Take into consideration the Blondell Commons, which is up the street and will be built, which will also include a school. The proximity of a 200 men's shelter near a school should be a concern to all of us. Those facilities will have men, some decent men, but it will also have men, based on my prior experience and what we all know, men with mental illness, men that are addicted to substance abuse and alcohol, and pedophiles.
Thank you.
So we need to be not only aware and attentive. This isn't Community Board 11 and 10 and council member coming against homeless shelters. We're just concerned for our neighbors and our community that we have built, the areas that we call home and the impact that it can have. So the effects on the neighborhood, schools, the hospital, first responders, this all needs to be taken into consideration, as well as the city planning rezoning, which is pending and should have been out already, and I'm waiting for a feedback. Traffic flow, landmark study, vicinity to the other schools, including Lehman High School, the special ed, children's baseball fields, which are literally around the corner, the methadone clinic, Bronx State, and there's other considerations that the city should be aware of, and we're going to make sure that we bring to their attention. I foiled the contract, the agreement that the provider has offered the city. I have yet to receive that contract. I don't expect to get that contract. I've asked who the developer, that's the person that made the original deal, who that person is. I can't get that information. They don't want to disclose it. I said, what if it's Trump? Well, you know how Trump developed shelters now in our community? No response. Use it as an example. There's no reason for secrecy. Government should be transparent.
Who's not telling?
DHS is not informing me. I asked, not only 10 days ago did I make the request, but again on Friday for the name of the developer, I wasn't given it, and again today at 4 o'clock on the way over, and they said we can't give it. I had Jeremy make the same request to see if he can get the information of who the developer is. We know who the owner of the property is, and we're going to do our best to work with him to discuss better uses. But we should also know who the developer is, so we can look into what type of work they've done. Are they doing work anywhere else in the city? And try to find that common ground that maybe they'll understand this is not the best neighborhood to build in right now because of this community and what is coming into this community. I have concerns of the men that are slated to be moving in. Are they really from Community Board 11? See, when they say there are 800, I believe is the number that was given, 841 individuals. Well, if they're going to use their 841 individuals' last home address as Jacobi Hospital, or Einstein Hospital, or Bronx State, I have a problem with that. That doesn't mean there were residents of Community Board 11. So there's a lot more work, and there's going to be many more questions that need to be answered. I'm here to do your bidding, and I'm going to ask the difficult questions, and collectively we're going to take a position, and we're all going to stay on target. I want to thank you all for being here tonight, and I'm looking forward to defeating this plan and any plan that impacts our neighborhoods in a negative manner. God bless you. I want to introduce a friend of mine, known to me, and he's an attorney by trade, but he specializes in environmental law and land use. John Parker.
Good evening, everybody. Councilman John I, leaders of Community Boards 10 and 11, and distinguished community members. You know, it's interesting, before I start, I'm sitting here with lights in my face. It's very difficult, aside from the blue lights, to see your faces, but what I can see collectively is concern. And I wanted to start with that because, you know, I've spent time in government, I've spent time in private practice. I was able to be in a leadership role in the environmental department of the state, in the lower Hudson Valley, doing a lot of different land use issues, a lot of different environmental issues. And in the end, you know, the facelessness of government always has to meet the people that live in the communities that have to share the burden, shoulder the burden. So tonight, it's important that we start there. So I've been asked to just give a very brief overview of some of the legal issues that folks ought to be aware of. As the councilman indicated, we're at the beginning of the beginning. It's a shame to say that because we're at the beginning of something we don't want to be at the beginning of, but it's also important to take advantage of that and put some knowledge with respect to process together as we move forward. So I always look at these challenges as like a stool, a three-legged stool, right? There's always some critical parts to this. The community involvement, which is you, is a critical component here, and it's really not what I've been asked to speak about, but the passion and the concern for the community is evident. The second component of that is community leadership, and I think you're seeing leaders here struggle with decisions that they've not been asked to make, but yet have been forced to live with, and are forced to deal with in a way that's both responsive to the community, but that's both reasonable, rational, in accordance with the law, which is the third leg of this stool, which I want to raise, which is why I'm here. There's lawful legal processes that have to be followed by government. And in this situation, it's going to be interesting because you have legislative priorities, you have mayoral actions and mayoral agencies, and we may well end up in front of the court. Because this is not going to be easy and this is not going to be simple, but it's important that we keep some perspective here. So let me lay out a couple quick things. There's literally books and books and hundreds of cases that have dealt with issues that deal with particular impacts to community, which I can't get to, but let me just give you a sense of things. There are processes and procedures at these agencies, DHS, Metro North, the environmental agencies of the state that are all going to be engaged here. That includes also the mayor's office and every other subsequent approval, whether it gets to historic preservation or not, it's another issue. So each of these agencies are going to have to be held to account at every step of the way. The councilman mentioned earlier something that's really critical here, and that's gaining access to documents that allows a process to be transparent. That's the freedom of information process. We call it FOIL, freedom of information, all in short. But already, that's the first tool to get a better understanding of what these agencies and where in this process they are, right? They have to tell us when we ask, what are the emails, what are the documents, what are the communications? Now there's certain things that can be shielded, but the goal is to know what they know and understand whether or not they're following the rules. So the first step we're already having some struggle and some challenges with, right? Requests have already been made, and requests are gonna have to continue to be made, so we can see what the agencies do at every step of the way. The contract, critical, we don't have it. Then there's process and procedure. So folks have been hearing this with respect to the zoning right, and as of right use. Sounds imposing and sounds in some ways impenetrable, but here's what it means. So there's a zoning code. We're all familiar with it, whether you actually know you're familiar with it or not, you are. There are some districts in Manhattan that have buildings that are like, they're tall buildings, and there are other buildings in the communities around the city that have regular neighborhoods, multifamily buildings. All of that is dictated by the zoning code, of what can be built where, how it can be built, what it can look like, how tall it can be. And in this case, an as-of-right zoning means essentially that you have a right to build a certain type of facility. And as folks know, this is an auto repair shop on, as I've been told, contaminated parcel of land. So there's a right to have one of the uses be a shelter. But nonetheless, it has to go through other process and procedures for the state law, but also for the city law. So what does that mean? Well, just because the government decided that this is the best place for a particular type of shelter, doesn't mean it doesn't go through what's called environmental review. What does that mean? Well, we all have questions, right? We all have things and concerns, whether it's the way the community and our neighborhood feels like, whether my block looks like this or my block looks like that, the impacts to the schools, the impacts to traffic, how is it going to be with the community, the cumulative impacts of other areas around the neighborhoods that are surrounding the project. So these are concerns that folks raised all the time. But I can assure you the law requires them to be considered. So when you're at the beginning of the beginning, and we start to get access to documents, we start to identify these concerns and make sure they're accounted for. So that's one of the things we're going to have to do. When the process of the environmental review happens, so yes, they can build as of right, but that as of right has to go through the environmental review process. And we're going to make one of the things to do here, which we use that legal process, the third part of the stool, to make sure this process and the procedures are followed. And a couple of things, so you know, the goal of this review is to minimize, and this is a legal standard, to the maximum extent practical the impacts to the community. That means that they just can't say it goes there and it makes sense and it's fine, and that's the end of the conversation. We have to deal with a number of issues, which include the socioeconomic breakdown. I'll provide any information that is factual, statistical, and important to consider. Then there's the, I would argue, disproportionate impact of some of the areas in both of the communities, districts, community boards, areas that are, have a significant number of these facilities. These issues all have to be factored into this decision making. We have to make sure that they're done properly. So the concerns that you hear raised today here, and I'm sure they'll be raised in a few moments when folks get to speak, will be part of this orderly process. But as part of the beginning concept that we discussed, is that we're going to make sure, or whoever is here is going to make sure that those issues are raised, and that the agency, DHS, the mayor's office, and others have to answer for each of those components before they reach a final decision. A fair share analysis, we talked about this, are the neighborhoods surrounding the proposed 1364 Blondell Avenue site overburdened with these type of facilities? That's another series of issues. We talked about Metro North and their process and procedures. We're going to have to make sure we identify that those processes and procedures are followed. One of the things that is part of this review is this idea of coordinating it, doing it once, doing it comprehensively, but doing it correctly, and making sure these issues don't fall off the radar for anyone. So that's why we're flagging it for you to identify them as part of this environmental review process. So there's that. Then another part that I just wanted to raise, which is important, is what is the site characteristics? What does contamination mean? I don't really know what contamination means. I could presume I would know from the type of facilities operated there. But that environmental contamination is going to be another part of the process that has to be considered, and it has to be gone through, and the community will have to be put into that process as well. So dealing with the contamination, what's the extent of it? Can it be removed? How is it going to be dealt with? for whatever the next use of that site is going to be is critical and important, right? So that's another part of the legal analysis. So in the end, to make this brief and we can answer questions, there is a right under the zoning code for certain things to be built here. That's not the end of the story. The story has a process, an overlay that has to be done as well. And every community, the community members here need to make sure that as the record begins to be built, as we start to understand what the agencies did, we see the communications they had, why the certain contractors were selected, what was the process, why was this site chosen, and we get those documents under FOIA. But then we then apply that knowledge into the review process and moves forward. I can gain some insight to the group here. I don't think anybody thinks, whether you're for this, against this, or on the fence about it, I don't think there's anybody in this room that doesn't think this is a potentially significant impact to their community. That's a standard of law. That's a standard of law that's going to have to be addressed in the process and procedures. So thank you for the opportunity to very briefly walk you through. I assure you, fairly complicated city, state, and some of this is actually federal law as well. But the good news is that as difficult as what's going to have to happen as this process moves forward, there are rules, there are processes and procedures, and that when you're aware of them, whether they're environmental contamination, fair share, MTA, Metro North, or otherwise, that people participate in meaningful ways, have their voice heard, and make sure, in the end, that the legal standards and the agencies are held to account when they make those decisions. And again, it may involve the courts down the road, but let's see what a record can be built as it goes forward. So thank you very much for your time.
And so we're going to ask people to come up now to the microphones for questions. Yeah, we prefer questions, not statements. Genuine questions, please. So actually, yeah, I guess we want the Assembly Member's Office to come up first, and then I think Westchester Square Bid. Do you want to say a word? Okay. So yeah, if you.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Matthew McKay. My name is Matthew McKay, and I'm here on behalf of Assembly Member Michael Benedetto. I heard somebody ask where he is. He's up in Albany for session. He's mandated to be there. We want to stay with the community here, ensure that whatever does go into this property will best serve the community. Like was said earlier, there's also a very early stage in this proposal for this property. Like some of you may know, 2800 Buckland Boulevard, there was a proposed drug treatment center. We were on top of that from the beginning. We fought that and we won that battle. So I hope like that, this center will be the same. I think it's very important to get the community involved and let them know, like you said, let's take advantage while it's early. There's no building there. So we can't house 200 people without a building. So we would have to build the building first to get the people. So we're going to stay with the community, and anything else, you go ahead and contact our office. Thank you.
So again, we have 2 mics. So if we can split the groups up, maybe some come here. More importantly, if you're not, don't stand in the row. Stand to the side. Let's make the line going this way. So you can come around, make the line go this way. Yes, because there are people sitting down that would probably like to see. And if some of this group can come to the other mic, that would be great too. Is there any other elected official reps that want to be recognized or say something? So, Katrina, are you still here? Could you stand up and say hi? So people want to come and say hi and see you? She went out that way? Okay. I don't know. I guess maybe, I don't know. All right, so Westchester Square Bid, Esmond Cruz.
Hi, I'm the Executive Director of Westchester Square. As many of you know, 10 years ago, Westchester Square was a very different area. We were plagued with uncontrolled gang violence, drug addicts, to say the least. For the past 8 years, property owners have spent over $3 million in revitalizing that area. Over $3 billion in revitalizing that area, and it has helped substantially. There's still a way to go. In the last year, the state released emotionally disturbed individuals into Westchester Square. Because of this, we had to hire a security guard. And that took monies away in terms from our programs, our marketing. Was it successful? It has been. Do we still deal with issues? Absolutely. There's still fights, there's still school fights. We are still dealing with emotionally disturbed people. We just had an incident last week, which I won't go into details, but we are still suffering these issues. So to put this onto the problems that already exist, it's just gonna break the camel's back at this point. We will not be able to sustain what we have built. At the end of the day, the square we wanted, Westchester Square, I mean that. 10 years ago, these businesses went out of business, mom and pop stores. We don't want that to happen again, and it will happen. So thank you for listening.
Okay, so please, when you come up to the mic, introduce yourself before you say anything.
My name is Robert Press, and I'm Councilman Andy King's representative to Community Board 11. Now, I have to ask the people up on the dais first, because I am not speaking for Councilman Andy King, and I'm speaking for myself. Would you like me to continue?
Yeah.
Okay. I have been a member of Community Board 8 for 6 years. I was its Public Safety Vice Chair, Traffic Transportation Vice Chair, Budget Committee Chair, and member of its Land Use Committee. Community Board 8 is the only board in the Bronx with a special nature area and a historic district. So one might say I'm an expert on land use. I'm also a reporter, as many of you know, so I get to question Mayor de Blasio. First of all, no one has said anything about the provider. Here is a paper that says the provider is under audit by the U.S. government for lack of, upon hearing of the deficiencies late 2018, management developed a policy in the first 6 months of 2019 requiring personnel to submit quarterly time efforts supporting how time is expended among grant and contract funding success. What does that mean? They can't account for their time for their workers.
So what's your question about?
Oh, no, wait a minute, I got plenty more.
I know, but it's a minute into it, going on 2 minutes.
Fine. On February 5th, I questioned Mayor de Blasio about this exact site. And I said, for 2.5 years, we have gone back and forth about you bringing people to the Bronx from other boroughs. He admitted yes.
To the mic.
He admitted yes to it, and he has changed his policy that instead of keeping people within the community board, they're coming within the Bronx. I'm going to try and make this quick. Now, as for Blondell Avenue, at the hearings for Blondell Avenue, I said, according to the zoning change, be careful what you wish for because you may get something else. And that's exactly what has happened. It is zoned for a community facility, which could be a homeless shelter. Now, Community Board 10 pushed through a zoning change, and Councilman King had a hearing up in Co-op City about the monopole area, which was going to be changed to a CA2 zoning. What a CA2 means, a community facility can be put there. I asked the Borough Commissioner of City Planning, would that include a community facility, CA2? And grudgingly, she said, yes. Okay, I then said to Councilman King, you better oppose that, otherwise you're gonna have a homeless shelter up in Co-op City, because I know Community Board 10, and that's where they'll put it.
So what's the question, Bob? Because it's going on 3 minutes.
Okay, the question is, the site is suitable for a family shelter. Okay, you had said that there are 374 families that the board is responsible for. Would the chairs, Al, would you be in favor, and Councilman, would you be in favor of a family homeless shelter instead of a 200-bed men's homeless shelter with level 1 and level 2 sex offenders. And Councilman Jonah, do you know what level 1 and level 2 means? Yeah. And there's also.
Robert, just let me add to part of that question. I don't want another homeless shelter in the Bronx at all. What happens is we make deals, and we shouldn't have to make a deal. We should just, dig our heels in and say, that's it. Enough is enough. I mean, we definitely 200 men homeless shelter is a disaster to that entire community and the surrounding community. No matter what you say, all the good things you want to put on it, it'll be a detriment, and you'll lose your middle class, you're going to lose your businesses, it's a detriment to this community.
You should never change
Bob,
the zoning.
Bob, you're absolutely right about the vendor, but that's no point. We don't want to get to that point where we're talking about the vendor, because that means we've given up on putting the shelter in there. So you're right on that charge, it's something we want to discuss.
All right, so, I apologize, Bob, if you went a little too long on that. Coming 2 minutes. Anybody goes that close again, we're cutting you off for 2 minutes, okay?
Hi, I'm Mike Jacobi. I used to be on Community Board 10.
Oh, the mic's not working.
Well, I'm Mike Jacobi. I used to be on Community Board 10. And as Community Board 10 members, very little, really little, real little, not socialist or any of these things. And I would vote for a lot of different things, but when JP Housing was talking about coming into Community Board 10, I knew that they had single men that drug, and you gotta take care of them, but not necessarily in our area, because like Joe said, we are proliferating with mentally health, especially mentally health places. And I'm an HRA for 34 plus years. And I've been at every center except 2 in Manhattan and the Bronx. I've interviewed thousands of homeless people, thousands of mentally ill people, thousands of drug addicted people. And I can tell you that from 1986 that I came in, the city has had a wrong policy, which maybe the councilman could push. He might not win any ground, but he could push. And that is, you can't have a housing program that takes the homeless situation when a person is about to be evicted, is going to be evicted, has been evicted, or is in one of these programs like Jiggets that started it.
You have 30 seconds, Bob.
Mike.
I'm sorry.
And this new thing that Hevesy is doing upstate, it's not going to work. What you have to do is you have to increase your rent levels to at least the HUD levels of our area, which is Westchester and the Bronx. And you have to, it's $215 for a person to get to, that's on public assistance. $215 since 1970. The New York City, their county, are the only counties in New York State that has not increased their rent levels. We've saved the state billions of dollars. It's time to change the policy.
Thanks, Mike. Thank you. Thank you for your service. You've also done a good job. Sandy Less? Oh, hold on.
Okay, thank you. I hope that doesn't count like 2 minutes.
We started.
Okay, I'm from Westchester Square Street Improvement Organization, and I want to confirm and support everything that Yasmin said from the bid. I worked with the bid and merchants for 10 years. 10 years to get Westchester Square off its knees. Okay? Off its knees. And unfortunately, we're so close to having a 5-point plan complete with the new library that the councilman had arranged for. Every other piece is there. Our Dolan is getting renovated. And now, if they put this shelter 1 block away from Westchester Square, there are already 198 homeless men, so I believe, that are in Bronx State, and they gravitate methadone, and they hang out in Westchester Square. This will be 400 homeless men 1 block away from Westchester Square. Everything we have achieved will be destroyed. And you're going to have Blondell Commons. The goal was to have children, families living there. Who is going to want to move next to that with children? Okay? This is an example of Westchester Square. My question is, who will save Westchester Square? Thank you.
My name is Debbie Roth. I'm from Edgewater Park. There's 675 families in my community. Westchester Square has come a long way in a short time, and I'm very grateful for all the people who've worked here. My understanding, and I'm hoping that I'm wrong, I hope the mayor's office representative is still here, that she didn't leave. I heard that the mayor is getting even with the people in the Bronx because we don't vote Democratic enough for him. And they're dumping this on us. And they don't care about the people in the Bronx. So that is my question mark. Is there any truth to that? So, just my question. So my question, and I hope the mayor's office is here, because I'm going to do everything I can to get the vote out in my community, because I'm sick of the Bronx getting crushed by the garbage of everybody else in New York City.
Thank you, Debbie. We are all passionate about this community, where we live, raise a family, and we should be passionate. And if we have a good community, we want to make it better. If it's clean, cleaner, safe, safer, and your opinion matters, and I'll make sure that we deliver what you say here tonight to the mayor and do whatever has to be done, because it's your message. Thank you.
Our borough president, too, please make sure he understands.
I'm Dr. Carl Anderson. I'm a resident on Blondell Avenue. I live very, very close to this site, and I think this shelter would be just a horrible, horrible thing for this area. It's a nice area with mechanic shops, auto body shops, a lot of residences, a lot of children, also a lot of minorities who are there too. A couple of questions. First of all, what would the men be doing after hours? There's really nothing to do. There's no place to go. There's no transportation nearby. There's no parks. They'll be going up to Westchester Square and going around, and it's not going to be helpful there. And here's another question: why isn't there an effort to put people where they can get the services that they need? In other words, people can be there, they'll be disconnected from the hospitals nearby. You've got Bronx Psychiatric, you've got supervised residences, you've got substance abuse programs. Why shouldn't they be expanded however is needed to provide services for the people that are already there?
Great, thank you. Fuller's Park, if you get a chance, and it does say there's a 10 p.m. curfew for homeless individuals and whatnot. Pull it apart, send me an email if you don't have it, or contact our office, please. And I will send it on to the provider. But great questions.
As you know, what's going to happen is there's going to be curfews, and nobody's going to pay attention, and nobody's going to follow through, and they're just going to go.
Then fact they go to sleep. Okay? During the day they do other things.
Good evening. My name is Louis Rock. I'm a president of Westchester Square Civic. I live in this Westchester Square. I got this Westchester Square clean and viable without any help from our local officials, without any help from the bids, without any help. When I look at this audience, I don't see enough people. You are the cure, not the people sitting up here. All right? By doing the best I can do for my community and using my own money, I've been chastised. I don't want to sound like a complainer, but I have the cure. In Westchester Square, it's a disgrace. I go against what they're saying. We've had shootings. Today I went shopping in a pharmacy, and you know what? We got guys going in and stealing everything. They have to hire on Morris Park, the pharmacy, they hire police. And when we speak to our officials, we're gonna get more police. We don't need more police. And also, we have in the square, we have an individual, he's the security. I got pictures of him sleeping. I have photos of the man sleeping, and we're paying for this. We pay for additional sanitation, which is a joke. We pay, do you know the square gets $1 million? Do you know the administrators get $80,000? And we're sitting here? The part of the problem is the money's not going where it's needed. Okay, so now you bring in homeless. I'm familiar with that because I have a women's shelter, and I'm speaking that I live in the square. We have shootings, we have knifings, and the question is, when you shop in the square, can you get home safely with your goods? We had a woman stabbed in the stomach. All right, so the violence is here. Okay, now we also have Covenant House, which I brought up to our local officials, and they got into the area, and I tell them we have men with no pants on, and you know the answer I got? So what? So the answer lies in you and working hard to revamp these communities and stuff and take it in your own hands, because we were in the square, we are the bitches, and it worked up. The tide flew over to Morris Park. None of us are exempt. We need to work together, find out where the money goes, find out all that stuff, and let's wake up. This is the ones that are going to solve it, not these guys. And then the environmental attorney, where was you for Blondell? Where were you? You never showed up. You guys are disgrace.
My name is Dr. LaCroix. I'm also a resident on Blondell Avenue for many, many, many years. I also have an office for children, very much needed on Blondell Avenue, just a few doors down from this site. And I think, as the councilman already said, we cannot emphasize enough the safety of the children. That comes first. That comes first, the children. My question is, with the affordable housing, families and children coming, are they going to even know about this site? Is anybody going to, they don't want to move there if they're in their right mind, next to hang out for all of this. The children will be in danger, they're in danger. So I want to know if they're going to be informed, the developers even know, because they have a lot of money behind this. And I think on Blondell Avenue, you may not know, but there are homes. I see the school bus coming through. I'm behind it in my car. There's Blocks Chesbrough, St. Raymond's, there's Halpin, there's Robert, there's homes there. There's children. Children come first, and not to mention the seniors, the most vulnerable. So please think about that.
Thank you. I just want to make mention that we have the Comptroller's office, Marielle De La Cruz. You want to say hi? And then back in the back, we have Senator Biaggi's office. Miguel, Emily, and Marianne. Charlene?
My name is Charlene Jackson Mendez, and I think I'm with Debbie that spoke earlier that I am just so upset and frustrated by decisions that are made on the local and state level, and I don't understand who they are serving, because it's not our community. And I beg each and every one of you here, in addition to voting and coming to these meetings, if you would reach out to your neighbors. We must start voting and getting active. All of our neighborhoods in the Bronx, I've been researching and studying and trying to figure out what to do. We are among the lowest percentage of voting neighborhoods, bottom 25, and I think that's a huge part of the problem. What I want to say is that I am very concerned by the lack of transparency on the part of our city government. Every time that I block out time from my schedule, and mind you, I'm a working mom, fighting to keep my home. When I come here, I'm losing money that I don't have. But this whole letter here is about the desire for this organization to be involved in the community, but they're not even here. There is such a lack of transparency in the Department of Homeless. I want to know why. In my neighborhood, which is Van Nest, we have homeless programs all in our neighborhood that really affect us in a negative way. And those neighborhoods, those programs somehow are not counted in the census of CB11 homeless programs. Why does that have to be? Where do we go to get answers? We must come together and start writing, start thinking, start programming.
I'm a member of the Westchester Square Improvement Organization. Number one, thank you, Joe Russo. 21 social services in Westchester Square, Zuriga. Did you know, one question, did you know that 3 streets from Blondell, there is a homeless women with children shelter that was put up by DHS. They snuck it in and brought in mattresses under the cover of night. So 3 blocks from this, but the point is, we are Community Board 10, or 11. Number 2, over 20 years ago, Sandy Lusk and I petitioned, we went to a hearing at the Borough President's to get our neighborhood from Districts CB9 to CB 10 or 11, whoever would take us. And we were accused of being racist at the time. We researched. The census of 1990 showed that Sandy and I are the minorities. I'm sure by 2020, our neighborhood is a wonderful, diverse neighborhood. We have a large Yemenis, Bangladesh neighbors, mosques that have been built. We are very diverse, so I never want to hear the word racist used about my neighborhood. Number 3, why? Our state has acres of open. You got the geese there, so you've got acres of land. Why can't the city and the state cooperate? Bronx State is a stone's throw from Blondell Avenue. Anyone that objects, Blondell is an inhospitable place where they want to build
30
this.
seconds.
Thank you.
I was there at 2800 Brooklyn Boulevard. We were finding a drug shelter. We won. We were finding Blondell, 2400 Blondell Commons. We went to 3 hearings. I went downtown. I testified in front of the councilman, Jonah, and his chair. We went to 2500 with his Richard. We fought that. Now we're here again. But I believe the problem on Blondell originated from 2800 Blondell Commons. Mr. Jonah was advocating for it. The community was against it. Now he's fighting it. I think the cat already came out of the bag, unfortunately. And I find this very, very peculiar. Councilman Jonah is dealing with the owner, property owner. He could get the contract from them and find out who the developer is, find out if there's a timetable on the contract, when is it going to expire. I've never seen DHS, and we've been fighting part of a 5-borough coalition. I've testified. We went to fight and rally in front of the commissioner's house in Brooklyn. So we've been rallying throughout. We have our slogan is no shelters. No shelters, but we have solutions. We have solutions.
30 seconds.
So I want to say that beware of our elected officials. Please beware. Thank you.
Sorry, let me just I want to respond. And I have to respond to those that try to manipulate a situation so that they can hear themselves speak and spread false rumors. Egidio, stop with the rumors and the nonsense. What you do is you hurt community and the people that come here. You just accused me of what? Your accusations are false and meritless. If you have something to say, my dear friend, you can always contact me. You have my cell phone number. You don't need to do it in public. But it's the rumors that you start, and don't put his mic on, because he had a question there. I'm answering what you had to say, Egidio. I heard the needs of this community when it came to Blondell. I opposed Blondell Commons. That's when the owners of that development told me, well, what can we do next? I says, great, you tell me. They said a shelter. I said, you can't do a shelter, it's M1 zoning. They informed me about the shelter, and when I informed the community that in an M1 zoning, as of right, you can do a shelter, I was surprised, you were surprised, the whole community board was surprised. I ran to the community board since the day I got elected, community board 10 or 11, said, gentlemen, women, we have a problem. The mayor has developed a 90 shelter plan. On average, that means 2 shelters per community board. We need to get ahead of this thing because we can't wait for them to choose the sites. And we need to know what sites are available. I had several meetings at Community Board 11 about this, full board meetings, and Community Board 10. And the accusation was, Sharon, you're trying to use scare tactics. Now, I come from a school of try to fix it before, not wait. You become proactive, not reactive. So, folks, my heart's in the right place. I'm here for the right reason.
So, we have 18 minutes left, so what I'm gonna ask, excuse me, what I'm gonna ask of the question, you state your question, sit down, and then we'll take notes and try to address them all.
Before we had 10 minutes, I'm just taking my 3. Okay.
Well, only one person got away with 3 minutes.
My name is Reverend Marilyn Oliver. I'm the president of the Senior NYCHA building. And so I am concerned about my seniors, but I'm also a mother of a profoundly retarded daughter. You remember Woodward? They fought to keep us out of the community when we try to get community places for our children. My daughter now lives in the community after living at home for 30 years. So I just want to make sure that we're not panicking over something that is not scary as we make it to be. But I also like what Councilman Jonah said. Why not get affordable housing for them? Okay? So my thing is that for these young men that need some type of shelter, give them affordable housing. How come some of that property can't be affordable housing for some of those 200 men? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Gentlemen, sir?
Good. Good evening, everyone. My name is John Cummings. I'm a resident of City Island. I'm also a candidate for Congress, New York 14. That's not why I'm here. I'm here for a long-time resident of the community. I grew up in Parkchester. I lived in Morris Park for about 20 years. I live in City Island now. Just a couple of things. One thing about what Councilman Joe and I said. We have the Metro North coming in shortly. What's the rush on this property? Why is there such a push to sell this property to the city so they can build a homeless shelter when probably 3 years from now, the property will be worth triple what it is now? That's one question everybody should be asking themselves. Number 2, as far as that property is concerned, if the city would like to do something good with it, and I'd love to hear an answer from downtown, why doesn't the city buy that property for about $7 million, put some municipal parking in, so we can park it in shop in Washington Square? Yeah! I like that question. I'm from here, when we go downtown, we have worked at Arthur Avenue, a lot of us shop over there. You were there 30 years ago, it was going down because there was no parking. They put that municipal parking in, saved Arthur Avenue. It would be a huge boost for Westchester Square to put some municipal parking and screw everything around here. Thank you very much. Thank you. Brenda?
Yes, hi, good evening. My name is Bernie DeFerrara. I'm the president of the Van Ness Neighborhood Alliance. I also sit as a board member on Community Board 11. So I've been to the land use meetings where the Department of Homeless Services representative was there. This might seem a bit repetitive to everyone else up there because I've brought it up. But the Department of Homeless Services does not want to hear anything about the larger list of places that the community already has. Now, I can speak for Van Ness. Charlene, as you heard before, she's our vice president of the Van Ness Neighborhood Alliance. One of the problems is Van Ness has 2 and 3 family homes, mostly. So we have HASA, we have, they rent out 2 and 3 family homes and the programs are in there. On one block, we've got a group home, we've got 2 other programs, and around the corner we have 2 other programs. It's oversaturated. And the Department of Homeless Services says, well, that's not a real shelter. but it's all city facilities, it's all city programs. I just want you to know, 2 or 3 doors from my house, I have a unique services, okay? They have, it's for men. We have one problem guy. What he does is now, before he used to urinate on the cars, and now what he does when he sees families in front of the mother and the child, he'll come out and expose himself. And this is what our families are dealing with. So my problem, I mean, I don't know how to get through. I mean, all the quality of life issues that we are fighting for are being torn down. And the other issue is that building that they're going to house us. We are owed 3,000 CEC 11, 3,000 middle school. Why not put a middle school there? Why not put a community center? Why not put a that probably don't even belong in our community?
Thank you, Brian.
My name is Daisy Paloma. I'm nervous, so I wrote something down. I'm a homeowner in Schuylerville, District 10. I actually live on the south, near 8th Street Mart. I come today to plead and to speak to everyone else's concern that, you know, the homeowners in our area, District 10 and 12, are struggling. We're like really struggling with the quality of life issues. We're holding on by our fingertips. So my question is, what is the government and what are local, you know, like the city, doing for homeowners that are actually really struggling? We're trying to keep our homes repaired. We're trying to keep our streets clean. They're doing nothing. And we're not doing well. All we're getting is dump time. And I'm saying it seriously. I have 2 children. I'm a single mom. I own my own home. I purchased it myself. It's falling apart because when you're, you know, on a 100-year home, these are things that happen. What happens in our neighborhood is that we're getting all the residue of the individuals from water plays. People say, oh, that's not close. Yes, it is. It is so close. I get people screaming up and down the streets. Everybody blames Havana, but it's not even them. We get people from water plays coming down to our areas, and they're renting these houses. They're renting these houses and putting people who are, you know, in shelters. My question is, one, what are we doing about that? How can we resolve that these homes are being sold to investors that are using them for shelters or for other places, and they're not for homes, for homeowners or families? What are we doing? What can the government do to help us?
Thank you.
My name is Efrain Gonzalez III. I work for Montefiore. I live in Westchester Square, and in the late 1990s, early 2000s, I lived in Van Nest. So I pretty much know Community Board 10 and 11 very well. My concern is that this get along, go along policy from elected officials, and I'm not talking just, you know, I'm not talking about you, I'm talking about the state legislature, that we got an influx of homeless people because of the bail reform. So I want people to understand, sometimes you go those too fast, and I've seen it in some cop shows, where sometimes you put out a help wanted and you blow the case. I think that we got hurt there. My concern also is that I walk through the community all the time. I go right by Mark's office virtually every day after work, and I'm concerned about the children. There still are children at Lehman High School having connections with these interactions with homeless people. I'm also concerned about the bid because that's where I shop. So I'm not going on a hoorah, but what I'm saying is that if we don't figure out a balance, and Mark, I remember when you had mentioned about steering real estate because this was going to happen, and that's why I have to say that you were right.
30 seconds.
In closing, take a look at why people do things, and you look at City Hall, and make sure that they don't do it. So we're going to have to, whether we don't like each other or not, or we have differences, come together and fight this. This on environment, we could actually win, and we could get a school there if we wanted to, but you know, whatever the community wants. Thank you.
Oh, there's an issue with Mike. Robert?
I recall at Community Board 11, April 13, you held a meeting there stating that you would vote yes for Blondell rezoning despite opposition to prevent a homeless shelter at that location. Fast forward to August 28th, you call a meeting at CB 11 stating that the community should select a site for a homeless shelter. So I'd like to clarify, Councilman Jonah, are you against any shelter in the Bronx or any shelter in CB 11 or at this specific location? Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for that question, Roxanne. If you recall, 2.5 years ago, 3 years ago, I started a lawsuit against New York City because the borough of the Bronx was inundated. I did that out of my own funding. I did that on my own. It cost me almost $30,000 because the borough of the Bronx has 41% more supportive housing units than Brooklyn, 14% more than Manhattan, 99% more than Staten Island, and 100% more than Queens. I took on City Hall. This gentleman took it as far as he could, and they beat me in the appellate, and we're gonna go back again to sue the city of New York, because not only is the borough inundated, we don't get the resources to help these families for job training, for permanent housing. So I will continue to fight for the fair share of the borough. And I am, based on the reason we had this tonight, as you can see, it's a town hall, so we get information. I had a feeling we were going to be against the shelter. I am adamantly opposed against the shelter, Roxanne, because he's here for a reason. And even if no one else raises money for this lawsuit, I will hire Mr. Parker so he can sue the city on the grounds to prevent this shelter from coming in. It's the wrong place at the wrong time.
I'm going to try to keep this as brief as possible. My name is William Boyd. I'm 28 years old. It's my first town hall. I don't have any resentment towards any of you guys or any of the system. My main concern is basically crime in the area and what bringing a shelter might do for that specific area, the Westchester Square, Parkchester area. There's a very high crime rate, in the Tremont area right around there. And I feel like, if we can't stop shelter from happening, maybe we can utilize other locations like abandoned buildings or buildings like Spofford, renovate something like that, or areas that don't have much housing and people living in it. Utilize areas like that rather than building a whole new location, compromise the quality of life for everybody. That's my question. Use other facilities or utilize other, abandoned, areas like that.
Yeah, no, thank you for coming to your first town hall. I have been told that so in the past, the city would ask, well, you don't want a shelter here? Give us an alternate site. Supposedly other places in Queens have done that, and they said, oh, well, thanks for the alternate sites, but we're still going here. I don't know why that's the case. It's in Queens, I believe that happened.
Well, I just have one more question. I want to touch on something you said about being proactive and not being reactive, which is why I'm here, and I think that's a great thing for everybody to follow. And what can we do to help further that effort to prevent that from happening, from the shelter from happening?
I'll try to answer that question for you. I think somebody said it best before. A couple of people said it. Vote. You have to vote, and you have to hold your elected officials accountable. They're the ones, they're hired help. Mark is hired help. We pay his salary, and we pay the salary of all the elected officials that are in office. Well, we have to hold their feet to the fire and make sure that they represent us the way they're supposed to. But the more people that vote, people look and they say, and somebody mentioned, we have a very low voter turnout in the Bronx. So why pay attention to us? They don't care. If we voted, now they'd have to worry about it. It's like what they do with the inner city communities. They pay no attention. They make a bunch of promises to the inner city communities, then it's time to vote, they get elected again, they do nothing. And they get voted in every year. The same things happen over and over again. It's time to take a stand. We're Bronxites. We work together to keep the Bronx a place where we can raise our families and, you know, go to church, and go to shul, and go to wherever you want to go, mosque, and go safely. But we've got to stick together. We can't be throwing stones at each other. We've got to work together. We've got to vote out those that don't help us and vote in those that do.
Frank, you know?
My name is Frank Agravino, founder of Mars Park Association and vice president. I got one question. What are we gonna do with 200 people in the day? Where are they gonna go? What are they gonna do? Where are they gonna stand? What are we gonna do? Don't tell me come on Mars Park, because you know what happens over there. You're in trouble. I'm just letting you know. That's it.
Thank you, Frank.
I'm a retired HRA employee, so I see the money that's wasted and it could be better utilized. It's not, this board here has no control of it. As far as the income levels that comes from the mayor and so forth. But my question is, you said we have to stick together. So what's our next step from avoiding this? And if we do have to have a shelter, because everyone complains they don't want it in their area, that area, they have to go somewhere. But like you said, maybe they need to have a screening process. But what's our next step from this point on? And what is the borough president of the Bronx saying? Because I know the mayor's probably not helping you or giving this situation. So what do we, that's my question.
I'll give you a short answer. I'll give it to Mark to give you the answer.
Thank you.
What I think we need, what I would propose for that area is a senior, place for seniors 65 and over, that low income seniors, because they're a forgotten group. They get the same amount of money every year. Their salaries don't go up on fixed income, and those people would be, they would be conducive to the area. That's what I think we should put there. But again, it's not my call.
Well, all right.
So,
What's the next
this town hall was meant so we hear from and get the feedback. At this point, I will be drafting my first letter and asking my colleagues in government, in the state government, federal government, to sign on opposing this. At that point, I will turn around to Mr. Parker here, retain his services, so he can draft a legal letter advising the property owner and the developer and the city of New York on all of the issues and questions that we have surrounding this property. The idea is to let them all know we're gonna make this very painful. We're gonna make it drawn out. We're gonna find everything possible to challenge them on, to discourage the developer. You know, they have to, so you asked a question. It's multi-step. Hopefully, my colleagues in government will also step up and use their influence in the city and in the state. Then we turn to the professionals, let them do their job. And those questions and points that were brought up earlier, document our concerns. I don't know, maybe this land has historic value, the landmark going back to the Civil War. Maybe it's a historic site and it shouldn't be built at all. Maybe the environmental contaminant that's there can be challenged. The setback or the impact it'll have on the MTA. We're gonna use everything possible to prevent this site from being built.
Since you said the Bronx has enough shelters, why can't all the communities in the entire borough get together? Volume is
Everybody's worried about their own backyard, but Al is gonna tell you this.
I met with, I was supposed to meet with the chairs and the directors of all the community boards in the Bronx. Maybe half showed up, and we talked about exactly this, that we have to start working together as a community, as a Bronx community. Not like, don't put the shelter here, put it over there, put it over there. We don't want to keep it all. And that's what we're trying. So we're working on something grassroots in that area. So hopefully that'll take root.
But the question is, how did the community?
Michelle?
Hi, good evening. So here I am again. I'm always at these events and I'm always struggling and I want to fight for the community. I'm a long-term resident, my whole life, May. My mom is still there. Original house that her great-grandfather built for her. And I find myself at these events and it's always the same thing. We're always saying, no, we don't want it. Help us, Mark, help us, officials. Help us do something, and then you say you're going to help us, and we wind up with it anyway. I'm really tired of that. It's so frustrating over and over again. Homeowners, there's people that actually own their homes. I understand that there's people that need places to live. I get it. But there are people in this community that struggle their whole life to buy a home and own a home and pass it on to their children or whoever in their family. And yet they're moving out because we have homeless people coming in. We have people on the street showing their private parts to our children because they're mentally. How about we put them in Rikers Island? There's a beautiful right? Close it down. Let's put them all there. United States. Here's a great idea, right? Mark, I need you to fight for this really wholeheartedly. I want to trust that you want to fight for this. I want this not to be part of this community. I know I'm not at 11, but 10 is very close to 11. We need the back of this really strongly. We need a win, Mark. We really need a win. I say it all the time. This community is continuing to lose, not win. We're never winning.
So if you don't mind me responding, so some people know we had a drug treatment facility in our area that was also in Ward 10. We were able to stop that, right? So we're successful in some areas, but as the council member said earlier, even Billionaires Row, with one of the best former deputy mayor of the city of New York as a lawyer, was not able to stop it. So it's an uphill battle. It's really, really extremely difficult. I don't know if any community board has been able to stop a homeless shelter throughout the entire city. I don't know if you want to add to that, Mark?
I don't see, Michelle, thank you for the passion. And I swear we're gonna do everything possible. You care, and it's evident that everybody else cares. It's 8 o'clock at night, you're not home with your families. You're here to be heard and to hear what's going on and the impact that could possibly have on your home and value and your children's lives. We're to do everything possible. I can't tell you the outcome. All I can do is put my money where my mouth is. My own money, to hire a lawyer, write letters, gain support of elected officials, and continue to keep you informed step by step. If I had it my way, and I had a magic wand, I would not only stop this shelter, I would stop every shelter that's being built in the borough of the Bronx and New York City, go for more permanent housing, affordable housing, keep people in their home, and not warehouse homeless people together like they're sheep.
We have multiple issues here. As chair of the Transportation Committee, Community Board 11, I've said for previous programs, transportation is a mess in the damn Bronx. We need to make sure that we bring it up. Also, thank you for coming, but where are the rest of the people? We had an effective meeting for the drug treatment that we had a waiting line. If you want action, you need people. This is the only way to deliver things. Yes, Mark helps, but we need people to be involved. If we don't get involved, we'll get these programs. Get involved. Voting is fine. Our feet, our voice, demonstrate. Go to the cellar if we have to. That's our next step. Don't be ashamed to show your voice, show your face, and make it known that you are against this.
I just want to touch on a couple of things that Al said. Get out, go to these people's homes that are selling these properties. But that guy's got a big payday. The one we got to blame is the mayor. You got to call this out for what it really is. The mayor is sticking it to the Bronx. Been sticking it to the Bronx. He's got a vendetta against the Bronx. Mark, thanks for getting out in front of this. Like Joe Russo said, this is going to be, we got a homeless crisis right now, immediately. By the time this gets built, by the time this gets done, it's years down the road. We need this done now. Look what's happening in California, look what's happening in San Francisco. It's insane. They're defecating in the streets, they're shooting up. We can't get the information from DHS, but a criminal can get the information on who's ratting on them because that's their right. Where's our right? We need the rights right now. It's ridiculous. And I'll tell you right now, 200 people and roaming around in the Westchester Square, forget about it. This here, all this security and cameras at the facility, they gotta be back at 10 o'clock. That's bullshit. I have a homeless shelter down the block from you, just women and children, all hours of the night they walk down there. That's not enforced. So believe me, get involved, get behind this. This can't happen. Mark, thank you very much. And I want you to know, look who's the only official that's here today.
Hold on, Bob. So Mayor's waiting for you. And then Bob is the last speaker because it's past 8 o'clock and we have.
Yes, go to sleep. Yeah.
I'll be brief. My name is John Zaccaro, and I have the pleasure of serving as a district leader alongside Assemblywoman Natalia Fernandez in the 80th district. And I'm also a resident of Pelham Parkway. And while this shelter does not necessarily fall in line within my district, I think it's important to be here because I'm not just a person who serves locally, but I'm a father, I'm a husband, I have 3 children, and I think it's important that we continue to show up to these discussions and we continue to put our input. The reality here is that we have gentlemen up here on the stage that are gonna do what they need to do, but it's our job as a community. This room has a lot of empty seats, and I think it's important and incumbent on us all to make sure that we're not just showing up when it's our area and when we live in the confines of what's taking place. We know that these impact not just the direct and local community, but the surrounding communities. And so I just want to thank the community board. I want to thank Councilmember Joe and I for having tonight's discussion. And one side note, and I'll leave you with this. When the city pays per apartment at a market rate for each unit, that's 200 units at probably over $2,500 per unit. And I don't know about you, but I think when you do the math, there's a lot more that we can be telling the city that we can be doing with that money. Take your shelters, give us schools, give us senior programming, give us after-school programs, and give us the resources that our families need to thrive. Thank you so much, and have a great night.
We have 2 more speakers in that, okay?
Mark, I know we've been trying to get the community boards together, but what are we doing about the Bronx delegation in the city council? Because, you know, those 9 council members in the Bronx, they meet regularly. They have more power to influence the mayor than the community boards or the people here. So are you getting support from those other council members? And if not, what can we do to push them to do so?
You know, Bob, you asked a loaded question. I have some great colleagues in government, especially my colleagues from the borough of the Bronx. Many of them really suffer from inundation of shelters. And when I say inundation, Salamanca, thousands of apartments that are shelters. Vanessa Gibson, thousands of apartments. When they look at me and they say, Mark, how come in Community Board 11 you don't have a single shelter? We're being crushed. It's very difficult for them to come here tonight and say, don't build one in Community Board 11.
It's not Community Board 11 we're talking about. We're talking about the borough of the Bronx that is so inundated compared to the other boroughs.
They stand with
that's where we
me.
need them to all stay together.
They stand with me on that, but again, it takes a lot of will, it takes a lot of courage, and it takes a lot of gumption to stand up and fight. Not that we're opposed to shelters. Fight where they're placed. Fight where the borough doesn't get the resources that it needs to help those families, give them the ability to help families find permanent housing.
Yeah.
We have these arguments, but it's a big city. The borough of the Bronx has 1.4 million, and the city has 8.6. The odds are against us. We have cheaper land here, and that's why they're targeting the borough of the Bronx. Same income, wherever these shelters are being built in the city of New York, the income is the same. The only difference is the acquisition cost and the development cost. And unfortunately, you can buy cheaper and build cheaper in the Bronx and get the same income from the city compared to the rest of the borough.
Well, we need to shame the mayor's office like you always say. Get the 9 delegates, get them into the New York Times, get them onto the TV, let everybody know what we know, that the Bronx is being abused in every way. So we get those 9 delegates to scream and yell out, maybe we can make a difference in the borough.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
Coming next.
Joseph McManus. I chaired Land Use Committee on Community Board 11 for about 10 years, and right now I work for Councilman Torres. So I have a little bit, I know about land use, I know about how politics works. I'm looking at the room here. If you really want this done, you have to fill a room 3 or 4 times your size. It's first of all, it's an as-of-right project. It's a mayor-centric city. What the mayor wants, he usually gets. He threatens council people all the time. If you don't do this, the district is going to get nothing.
Absolutely.
If you don't, if you're not out there in front of the bulldozers, if you're not blocking Blondell Ave completely so nothing can happen, it'll happen. Believe me. That guy up there is not important. None of these people are important. Everybody here is important. We had a project over by the firehouse in '97. We filled BS 97. We went to the BSA 5 times. I was down here 4 times myself. The developer won. He just got tired. He said, these people will be standing in front of the bulldozers. People power is more important than anybody up here. And this room should be filled. Where the hell is everybody? That means you have to get all your friends, all your neighbors, and make sure that they come out. When the guy starts to develop, block the street. Women with baby carriages, News 12, you will get more press than anything else. I don't blame anybody up here for not taking the lead. They're doing a great job. Community Board 10 and 11 always does a great job. Mark is always there, he always puts his head in, and usually gets chopped off, unfortunately. But he needs your help. He's only one person. The mayor is so powerful. It's set up like that. City government is set up for the mayor to run the city. What he wants, he usually gets. And it's pretty easy here. I was involved with that Commons. It was a ULURP. You had to go through the whole ULURP process. It's a whole land use process. And there was only 54 cars allowed there. Mark was able to get 225. So he did negotiate. People say, oh no, this and that. I was against the project when I was a chair. He negotiated to make it a better project for the square, because I talked to John Benizio, and they liked what was happening with the parking. But believe me, I'm gonna say it again, every time people ask me how do you do things, I said the people don't do it, it's not gonna happen. Remember?
Thank you, Joe.
Well, I thank you for your time, and please, tell your neighbors and your friends.
In closing, Joe's right. We have to start thinking like Bronxites, not like people from Westchester Square or Morris Park or Van Ness. We have to start thinking like Bronxites. We don't want any more homeless shelters in the Bronx.
Don't leave yet, because we want the attorney to close tonight. I want to thank you all for being here. And the African proverb says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And together we're going to go far. Thank you for being here.
I just want to close out by saying, look, I heard a lot of things tonight about rights. I raised rights from the very beginning of this conversation. Whether it's the right of the developer, whether it's the right of the landowner, the developer, or it's the right of the community. The only way it's going to work is if someone stands up for their rights, okay? So with respect to this project, I think tonight has helped identify a lot of key critical issues that are going to be difficult for the city to address. But basically, the law component of this process, community leaders, but the law process is going to be key as well. And the only way we're going to do that is if we process what we've learned today and step up on every step of the level, DEC, environmental review, and the DHS gaining access to records.
We can do this together. It's gonna take a fight, but we're ready to do it, and we're ready to stand up and say, you know, if this is how the project's gonna go, we're gonna hold you accountable. That's what the law is there for, that's what the court's there for. So let's keep that in mind, and I thank everybody for coming out tonight.
Thank you, everybody. Get home safe.
That department. Take care, buddy.